This is the second part of the recordings covering the integumentary system. This recording is going to cover the dermis, hypodermis, and accessory structures. Now the dermis, which you see here, where they have the arrow here, is actually beneath the epidermis. So you see here's the slide of the skin. All this is the epidermis. And here is the dermis. Now, about 20% of the dermis, the part that's closest to the epidermis, is actually referred to as the papillary dermis. So I'm going to erase this so you can see it. So here it's referred to as the papillary dermis. Now, the papillary dermis is composed of areolar connective tissue. Also, reminds you about the connection between the epidermis and the dermis is the epidermis. I'm going to show you on this picture here. We're zoom in on one of the models. Is you see these coming down like this. These are the epidermal ridges, and they've pulled the epidermis away on this part over here. They removed it, and what you see are referred to as the dermal papilla, and they kind of interlock. So it kind of helps with the kind of structural integrity, kind of keep the two layers together. Now also what you'll notice on this model is we see a sensory receptor associated with the papillary dermis, and it's referred to as the MEISSNER'S corpuscles. And the MEISSNER'S corpuscles you see here, right there, and a couple of them right here. Now on a microscope slide, here's actually you can see a MEISSNER'S corpuscle. They are involved in detection of light touch and dynamic deformation. So they are sensory receptors. So you'll be able to detect, touching something very lightly and the deformation of your skin. Now beneath the papillary dermis, we have what we're referred to as the reticular dermis. Now this is cut off. The reticular dermis is much bigger, but we had to zoom in so you can at least see the epidermis and the papillary dermis. But the reticular dermis, if you look at it, you see a lot of dense bundles of collagen, but they're running in an irregular fashion. And the connective tissue that it's made up of is dense, irregular connective tissue. That collagen in the skin provides strength to the skin, and have it running in not in a regular but rather in an irregular fashion helps provide a little bit of strength to the skin. When you think about skin is kind of pushed and pulled in multiple directions. Now the reticular dermis is also a location of one of the sensory receptors that we'll talk about is the PACINIAN corpuscle. And you see a couple of them right here. And again, to remind you that PACINIAN corpuscles are not just located in the skin. In lab, you'll have a slide, we'll say PACINIAN corpuscle, but it's actually a slide of the pancreas. But some of you will be lucky in slides of the skin, you'll actually see some PACINIAN corpuscles. And actually, we'll see in this one, another place that you can see PACINIAN corpuscles is down in below the reticular dermis. So you're seeing the reticular dermis here, but right here, where you see all the fat, that's actually the hypodermis. But you can find them in both locations. Now this is involved in detection of pressure, but also vibrations. Now there's some other structures associated with the dermis, and we'll talk about some of them a little bit more in depth, but I'll just kind of basically provide you with some of them using a lab model. But first, okay, so on this lab model, these are PACINIAN corpuscles. Right here is a MEISSNER'S corpuscle, and you see another one right over here. But other structures associated with the dermis is structures such as your hair follicles, and the erector pili muscle, which you see right in there. I'm just going to color it in. There's a smooth muscle associated with the hair follicles. But you'll also see some exocrine glands, and we're going to look at sebaceous glands and apocrine as well as eccrine sweat glands. You'll see blood vessels here in the dermis. Those are very important in that they're going to provide some nourishment to the epidermis, since the epidermis is avascular. The before we kind of look at the hypodermis and some of these accessory structures or accessory organs, I want to talk about some clinical correlations. Let's first talk about wrinkles. Now, wrinkles is naturally associated with the aging process, but wrinkles can be increased, or the amount or the onset could be increased by some certain factors, and I'm going to list them in a second. But what actually wrinkles is associated with is actually a result of a reduction or a loss of elastin fibers. So you do have elastin fibers in the skin, and that allows, like if say you move things, it wants to keep its same structure, same shape. But when you start losing them, then you lose some of that ability to kind of retain its shape. But some things that can increase the development of wrinkles, because it's associated with damaging of the elastin fibers, one of them is exposure to ultraviolet radiation, sunlight. Plus also a big one is cigarette smoking. And I want you to think about it. It's like, does it sound like, oh, this kind of makes sense if you think about, if you know anybody that is a smoker, and lots of times people that are smokers, it tends to prematurely age them. If you look at my brother compared to me, my brother's only a year older than me. He looks a lot older than me because he's been smoking since he was 19 or 20. He stopped smoking just recently. Another thing is, if you think about people who have been out in the sun a lot, and like people that work in the sun a lot, or people who just go to tanning salons a lot or suntan a lot, that also tends to prematurely age their skin. I did have, went to college when I was 18. There were some girls that grew up with, they were a little more privileged than me, and so they would always go away on spring break. They always would go to tanning beds a lot. And, okay, I'm jealous the fact they got to go to spring break a lot. But what didn't feel so bad when you look at them is that because they had been just exposed to sunlight for so much, because we always call it fake baking, or, fake tanning, is they would go to the tanning salons a lot, and they're 18, same age as me, but they looked a lot older than me. So it kind of started damaging their skin. Now, the other thing that I have these, is stretch marks. So stretch marks are caused by excessive stretching of the dermis. Okay, so think about instances where people get stretch marks. I got stretch marks later in my pregnancy with my daughter. All of a sudden, I was small, and all of a sudden, bam, I got big very quickly, and so I ended up getting stretch marks. You also see stretch marks if someone puts on a weight very quickly. It could be gain of muscle or fat, so you tend to see some stretch marks. And so you get excessive stretching of the dermis and kind of exceeds the elastic capabilities of it. You'll see the appearance of stretch marks. Another term for it is called striae. Another thing I want to mention is something called, we refer to as the lines of cleavage of the skin, or Langer's lines. These are known to physicians, especially anybody who's doing any type of surgery, is they're aware of kind of how the collagen fibers in your skin are oriented, how they tend to run in certain locations of your body. And the significance of it is, if you have somebody that wants to perform surgery on a certain part of your body, they would prefer to cut along the lines of cleavage. So if I say I have lines of cleavage like this, if I'm going to do an incision, I want to cut parallel to it. I do not want to cut perpendicular, because if you cut parallel, it heals better. It's going to be less likely for those edges of the incision to pull apart. You can get less scarring. So it's kind of the significance of it. Now, other thing I want to talk about briefly is the hypodermis, because again, hypo, below the dermis. Another term we refer to as the subcutaneous layer. Is the hypodermis on this model you see is right here. And what you see in there is adipose tissue, but it's also location of some areolar tissue. But some of us, more than others, have a little bit more adipose tissue in there, and it kind of provides a little bit of protection, some padding, some insulation, definitely. But also, if you kind of see the sections in here, these are sectioned through some larger blood vessels. Is you do have a lot of vascularity in that hypodermis, and they're the major blood vessels that supply the skin are going to be located in the hypodermis. And people, you know, there's something I just let you know. If you've ever have a chance of ever doing any type of surgery, I'm just letting you know, fat bleeds because you got a lot of blood vessels in fat. Because I've done surgery and you cut through fat, it bleeds. Now, last thing I want to mention is what we refer to as accessory structures. These are actually epidermal derivatives. You find them in the dermis or a hypodermis, but they're actually derivatives of the epidermis. The first one I want to mention is hair. Now, you find hair in everywhere in your body except palms of your hand, soles of your feet, your lips, some of the external genitalia, and your eyelids. But everything else you'll have hair. Now, hair follicles are actually living. And if you kind of look here, here's showing you kind of part of the epidermis. If you come down here, look, it looks the same. So it's actually an epidermal derivative. The hair itself, which you see here, is dead. And it's similar where when you think about skin and the epidermis is the hair is filled with keratin, and it gives strength to the hair, but eventually the hair will kill off the hair. The hair, I should just say, the hair is dead. Hair analysis is actually commonly used for a number of different things. You can actually, just for forensics, you can tell if you put a hair, you could tell between humans and animals. So it's like they find a hair on somebody, they want to know if it's, like they thought someone killed somebody. It's like, okay, what do they have on their body? Is it a human hair? Is it an animal hair? They can determine that. They can also use it for DNA analysis, depending on what they were able to get. If they get just the hair, they can do mitochondrial DNA testing. If they have an intact, I'll come back here, the hair follicle is living, but if they got this intact bulb down in here, they can actually do DNA analysis, or should say nuclear DNA analysis. So they can use it for forensic testing. Another thing they use it for is for environmental toxicology or forensic toxicology. Is hair, you can detect things like therapeutic and recreational drugs in hair. And you can also use it to detect things like for heavy metal poisoning. Now, when you think about it, it's like they use it for drug testing in some instances because levels of certain things may not be in, at some point in time, may not be in saliva or your blood or your urine, but they're going to be in your hair. And your hair, think of it, provides a history. And substances like cocaine and heroin and marijuana can be found in your hair months after you consume it until you cut your hair. So they can use hair for testing for certain drugs. But it's also used for determine if you have some heavy metal poisoning, things like that. Now, what are the functions of hair? Well, if you think about the hair in your head, one of the things, if you can look at this guy, is he's a cyclist, and he doesn't have a lot of hair, and you can tell where the lines from his cycling helmet are. It provides protection against ultraviolet radiation. Obviously, he doesn't have as much because he doesn't have as much hair, but also kind of provides insulation to your head. So people who are bald are going to get colder faster, sometimes they're more likely to wear hats, but also it provides like a cushion to your head. The hair on your eyelids, your eyelashes, your hair in your nose and your ears. What they do is they prevent entry of foreign particles or insects into your body, where it's like, think of your nose and your ears. So the hair has a number of different functions. But hair technically also, some would say, has a function, is more as aesthetic thing for mating type purposes. People are attracted to how people's hair are, but that to me is not very important. Now, another thing, since I'm talking about hair, I do want to mention the erector pili muscle. The erector pili muscle is smooth muscle, and it's attached to that hair follicle. It's under the control of our sympathetic nervous system. And when the erector pili muscle contracts, it causes the hair to stand on end. The fancy term for that is piloerection. You associate with the term goosebumps. So it provides, you get goosebumps. Now, piloerection in humans, the significance is very much debatable. But I can explain it in mammals who have significantly a lot more hair, and what piloerection is important for. So if you look here in animals, like you see the cat, or you've even ever seen it with your dogs, is when they have piloerection, it shows that a little bit of aggression, that, hey, don't mess with me, makes them look a little bit more intimidating. But if you look here on the right, is the piloerection in mammals provides as an insulation function. It traps air in there and it insulates the animal. And you can see here with the rat, here's with no piloerection, and here is piloerection. So kind of piloerection in animals other than humans, it does provide an insulating function as well as kind of providing like for aggression. Now nails, next thing I want to talk about, nails is also an epidermal derivative, and it kind of similar fashion how when we talk about how this skin grows, is that it starts here, we call the lanula, kind of like a half moon down here, and nails then grow outwards like this. And nails have a lot of keratin, provides a lot of strength, a lot more keratin than you see, say, in your epidermis. And it always grows from here out. And just to kind of so you understand this, is you see this girl, or it could be a guy, painted their nails, and as the nails grow, what you'll notice is here, this is the unpainted part, because this is where the nails start from, okay? The function of nails is one of the things that it provides for is manipulation. And just think about it, when you let your nails grow a little bit more, you can grab onto things a little bit better. Think about like pulling a splinter from your skin. You can grab it with your nails. If you don't have the nail, it's harder you have to go get your tweezers. It also serves to protect the ends of your fingers or your toes too. Now, last thing I want to talk about is glands, exocrine glands. And first I want to talk about is sweat glands, or they also refer to them as sudoriferous glands. And there's two types. And the first type is referred to as an eccrine sweat gland. Now, the eccrine sweat glands have ducts that allow its secretion to go to the outside, and that secretion from it helps to cool you off. Now, the eccrine sweat gland has a merocrine mode of secretion. So, merocrine, we mentioned in talking about the epithelial tissues and talking about glands. Merocrine mode of secretion means the cell stays intact, it's just the substance comes up, and it's an exocrine mode. It's released to the outside, and it allows us to cool. Now, these type of sweat glands are found throughout your body. They're active throughout your lifetime. They're not associated with hair follicles. That's one way you're going to be able to distinguish between them. But they also do look different than when you say, if you look here versus here, they look different from apocrine sweat glands. These ones are definitively involved in temperature regulation, and there's no odor associated with their secretion. Now, unlike apocrine sweat glands, which you see over here. Now, apocrine, we've learned about an apocrine mode of secretion where you have the apical part of the cell comes off with the secretion, but and the name for this came from, because that's originally they thought it exhibited this mode of secretion, but it doesn't. The apocrine sweat gland also has a merocrine mode of secretion. But apocrine sweat glands are not located throughout your body. They're limited more to the axillary region, your armpits, the groin, and around your nipples. Plus, these are not active throughout your lifetime. Apocrine sweat glands have a kind of a continuous secretion, but apocrine is more periodic. These become active when you hit puberty. And these are also associated with an odor, but the secretion itself does not stink. It's the secretion acted upon by bacteria found in your skin, which then produces the odor. Now, the question has been, well, what's the function of the apocrine sweat gland? It doesn't really become active until you hit puberty. The apocrine sweat gland is considered in most mammals to actually be more of a pheromone. So I'm going to write pheromone out. So pheromones are kind of ways of what's the word I want? Kind of more like a mating type thing, kind of telling the opposite sex, or like that I'm ready for mating, that type thing. So those are kind of like the pheromones. Apocrine sweat glands are involved in what we call emotional sweating, anxiety, fear, stress, sexual stimulation. That's what's associated with the apocrine sweat gland. Now, I want to show you kind of these two lab models. Here's one of them, and if you have to look real carefully, it says axilla on there. This right here is an apocrine sweat gland. Now, apocrine sweat glands are usually associated with hair follicles. So you'll notice the duct leads into where the hair follicle is. On this model, eccrine sweat glands, I'm going to circle in green. Here's one. You see the duct going to the outside. Here's another one. The only difference is this one here has been cut so you can see in. Here's the one you see the duct coming up to the surface of the skin. And there's another eccrine sweat gland. So only the middle one is an apocrine sweat gland. On this model, here is an apocrine sweat gland right there in the middle. And then all the rest of the ones that are like white are eccrine sweat glands that you see here. There's only two models that we have that depict apocrine sweat glands. None of the other ones do. Now, there are a couple modified apocrine sweat glands, and the first one, actually in your notes, is, you write this one down, is ceruminous glands. These are found lining your ear, and they secrete something called cerumen, which is waxy. So think of your earwax. That helps it has an antibacterial quality to it. It also helps to soften the inside of the ear, along with something called sebaceous glands that we're going to talk about inside your ear. Now, mammary glands are also modified apocrine glands, and they secrete breast milk. That's all I'm going to talk about for now. The last type of glands I want to talk about are sebaceous glands. So here's a slide. You can actually see a cross-section through a sebaceous glands. Now, do not confuse sebaceous glands with sebaceous follicles. Sebaceous glands are associated with hair follicles. Sebaceous follicles, they will secrete a substance called sebum directly to the surface of the skin. Now, sebaceous glands secrete this oily substance called sebum that is antibacterial. It also kind of softens your hair, makes it more pliable. Think about it is as you get older, the amount of sebum produced by that does decrease, so your skin tends to get drier, your hair tends to get drier as you get older. Now, the mode of secretion from sebaceous glands are holocrine. So the entire cell and its contents, the sebum, come off with the secretion. So that's the end of the second part covering the integumentary system.